Hello, ridiculously happy people. I'm just getting everything set up right now. Sorry if there's any camera shaking. I have my laptop sitting on a box, which is not super stable. So today in my second Facebook Live, which is still super awkward, by the way, I'll get the hang of it eventually. I wanted to talk about rescheduling and backup plans for photo sessions. So a couple weekends ago, I had to reschedule a session because the weather sucked, frankly, but mostly it was super muddy out, and the location that we were going to be shooting at was right on the water, and I didn't want people slipping around and having mucky shoes in their session and stuff like that. So we actually ended up rescheduling the session for July. Shout out to Caitlin and Mike, by the way. Thanks for having the flexibility to do that. So it's had me thinking, because as you know, if you live in southwestern Ontario, it's not like June yet. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what happens when the weather sucks, and whether you should reschedule your session or what you should do with backup plans. Now, the first time this came up for me and I didn't handle it super well was early on in my career. I actually had a family who booked a photo session, a large family group, aunts, uncles, cousins, and all of that, right after a funeral. And they had told me the reason they were doing it then was because they're never in the same place at the same time. So that was convenient that way, but obviously having your session right after a funeral is kind of a sad time. So for me, working with ridiculously happy people, it's a little bit different. But on top of the session happening right after a funeral, it was pouring rain. We did the session at the harbor in Meaford, and we ended up doing it under a pavilion. And I have to be perfectly honest, I don't think anyone was necessarily super jazzed about those photos, because not only did they have the emotional connection with that being a sad day, the weather kind of sucked. So we had the frizzy hair thing going on, the location was not fantastic, the lighting was not that good, and it just wasn't a great experience all around for anyone, I think. So that's sort of when I came up with my policy of rescheduling. And the reason that I like to reschedule a session above all else is because it's super important to me that my clients get photos that they love and not just get photos. As you might know, I like to work with people who really want to have good photos and not just check an item off of their to-do list, as therapeutic as it is to check an item off of your to-do list. So for not ideal circumstances, if it's raining or even if it's windy, I like to reschedule sessions. So for example, I had an engagement session with Claire and Sammy scheduled a few months ago when sorry for the honking cars outside, when the snow was melting. We ended up actually booking their session for a day that turned out to be kind of iffy. So it was spitting rain, it was overcast, and we were going to have a sunset session on the beach in Owen Sound, and it just wasn't sunset session on the beach material that day, so we ended up rescheduling. And I just wanted to show you the results of rescheduling their session. So where it would have been mucky and dim and kind of gross outside, it ended up being super gorgeous for their session. By the way, that is Moose, their new little puppy in their photo. We had a lot of fun. The ground was frozen, so we didn't have to deal with any mud. And we had a great sunset session at Haibu. Now, I recently heard a story from another photographer about scheduling a session with something like 25 family members around Christmas time. And obviously, I know that large families like to schedule these family photo sessions to get photos of everyone all together because they're not together that often. So what happened was this family was together for Christmas and it ended up being a snowstorm. So the photographer went and took the photos, but the backup plan ended up being taking the photos on the front porch with 25 people, so under a covered front porch in the wind. And from what I understand, the photos didn't turn out the way that people had hoped that they would. So hair blowing and cold red faces. And if you're anything like me, if you were in that position, your nose would be running and your eyes would be tearing up and you'd have mascara like going down your face. So not ideal circumstances, obviously. And when things like this happen and no one is sort of enjoying themselves during their session, they tend to associate the experience with the photos. So if you're not having a good time, if it's raining on you, if your hair's a mess, if you don't feel great while you're having your photo taken, you probably aren't going to feel that great about the photos afterward. That has been my experience with my clients. That's my experience when I have my photo taken. You really like to have fun and be in a good mood for your session. And for me, it's super important that my clients love their photos and not just have photos. So that's where my policy came from. And I think you're probably wondering, like, get to the point, Sophia, what do you do when the weather kind of sucks for your session? So as I've said, my policy is to reschedule a session. It's in my family portrait contracts. If the weather sucks, we will reschedule your session. That is what I prefer to do with people. It's not a problem for me to reschedule. I have no problem rescheduling your session to make sure that you have the most ideal lighting and weather and everything, because I want you to get the photos that you want and not just check an item off of your list, as I've said. So what you should do is you should check with your photographer on what their reschedule policy is. You might also want to have a backup plan in the case of a large family group that isn't together very often. For example, I have a lot of people who like to get photos around Easter or the Canada Day long weekend or Thanksgiving. Like, those are the big ones. If all of your family is going to be together at that time, you're going to either want to have a backup date that weekend or a really good backup plan in case it rains. Which can be a little bit difficult to coordinate. So whether it's umbrellas, if everyone's going to bring umbrellas and you're going to have a super fun rainy day session, or if you're going to find a pavilion somewhere that's covered, or if you can fit into your host's home, that would be great. You might want to have that conversation with your photographer beforehand so that everyone is prepared just in case the weather sucks. You can also watch the weather, and maybe if it's going to be raining in the evening, you switch your session time to the morning. So there's sort of 2 times of day. There's not sort of 2 times of day. There's 2 times of day that are the best times of day to have your photo taken. One is first thing in the morning, and the other one is at sunset. And the reason these are the 2 best times to have your photo taken is because that's when the lighting is absolutely the best. I'm going to show you an example. Okay, so that's about it on that today. That's what I wanted to share with you. So just to recap, what you want to do with your photographer is you want to know what their reschedule policy is in case the weather sucks at your session. I've had lots of clients ask me this in preparation for their summer photo sessions. And it's a little bit tricky for the people who are coming up, for example, to Blue Mountain for the weekend and they want to get some family photos done. What I usually do with them is schedule them in for one time and then we'll have a backup time either the next morning or the next evening or maybe 2 days later. When the weather will have probably improved. And then we'll have backup options. So for larger families specifically, you want to have some backup options like a pavilion or umbrellas or something. Come up with a creative plan with your photographer where you can shoot and no one gets soaking wet and makeup all over their faces and all that fun stuff. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments and I will answer them when I have the time. If you are looking at booking a family photo shoot this season, I've posted a link in the description so you can follow that link and check out some more photos and then contact me that way. And then you can also find me on Instagram at ridiculously happy people, and that's spelled PPL. And thank you for watching. It's very sweet of you guys, and I hope that you have a great week. Talk to you soon.